So being a small firm, I guess you're very flexible in terms of how you're able to recruit people. And I know you've recently taken on some new graduates to join the team. Can you take us through the process and steps involved in recruiting them?
Yeah, sure. So I think certainly in the early days of the startup, and ideally as you grow as well, you use your personal network to start with. So you're basically, if you know someone personally and you know they're good, then that's obviously your first port of call. But after that, if someone else that you know recommends somebody to you, then that's worth a lot, because it simplifies the whole process, and you've got those trust points. So in terms of ways to get into startups, I think getting directly introduced or recommended by someone who's trusted by that startup is probably the number one way of getting in. Outside of that, of course, as you grow as a company, you can't just rely on your own network, so you have to start going out and trying to recruit externally. And there's a bunch of different ways startups can do that. So there's obviously there's events that are specific for startups. So there's things like Silicon Milk Roundabout in London. There's also there's the Tech, I think it's Tech City Jobs, and they have a special one on financial services as well. So those are sort of one way. But I guess fundamentally most of our applications come in through our website and our online application process. So what happens there is we'll advertise a role. We get a number of applicants through. We then sift that down in a multi-stage process. So first step is just to check a sort of sanity check on the application to make sure it's not just full of complete nonsense. Believe me, we get quite a lot of nonsense through that I could tell you about. After that, there's if they're successful through a sort of first sifting, they'd make it to a phone interview. And that would typically be up to half an hour with one of our employees. And that'll be a sort of general culture fit check, and sort of, going through the CV. It's not, particularly high pressure, but one of the things we check very carefully is that the applicant knows who we are and what they're applying for, which actually weeds out a lot of people. I think it's strange, you might think, but actually a lot of people just don't seem to even have the first look at the website before they've got the call with the company. Seems quite strange. So then after that, we have usually 2 face-to-face interviews. Ultimately, one of those will be with myself and my co-founder, James, because we still personally interview anyone we're going to hire. And the final step is actually perhaps a little bit unusual. We take them to the pub with the team and basically make sure that they get on well with everyone, and that the rest of the team want to take them on board. Because I think there's one thing being able to do the job. It's another thing being fitting into a team and being part of that team. There's no drinking challenge as such, but it's more of a sort of personality test, and just check that do you actually want to work with us? Do we want to work with you? How's this going to work out in reality? And we try to only hire people that you'd actually want to spend some time with in the pub, basically.
And have you found many people have failed the pub test?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, but yeah, I mean because we check the feedback from the rest of the team afterwards, and it's we've had it is quite tricky. I mean, we had one where there was someone who was just very, very quiet and didn't really engage with the rest of the team at all. We wouldn't want to hire someone who's the opposite end and really crazy. But you sort of need to feel like you're excited about hiring that person. They're going to come in and do a good job, but also make the place a bit brighter and nicer to work in if you can.
Interesting. And in terms of specific skills and attributes that you're looking from graduates, what would they be?
Depends on the role to some extent. So, but there's some sort of generic things we would look for in any applicant. When you're in a startup, it's not like a big corporate environment where you get sat down and told exactly what you're doing on every day, on a daily basis, and there's a very strong hierarchy and set of rules and procedures and processes. You've got to be much more self-starting in a startup, fairly obviously, but there aren't enough people around to be able to keep telling you what you should be doing every day. So we need to identify people that are comfortable in that environment, very self-starting, can just pick things up and run with them, and be pointed at a more general area and figure it out to some extent. So, we've had that in multiple roles. And I think the great thing from the applicant's point of view and the, when they've got the job is that there's huge potential to grow in a startup that you just won't have in a big corporate, because you can very, very quickly take on huge amounts of responsibility, and the company's going to be really happy for you to take that on as best you can and to keep growing and growing inside the organization. So in terms of, I guess the number one thing I'd look for is someone who, can deal with that sort of environment. Alongside that, as mentioned, they've got to fit in culturally with the team. So we only try to hire people who are pretty sort of friendly and outgoing and could be client facing. We'd have no worries about that, whatever their role, even if it's a very technical role, and quite well rounded because of the nature of the environment.
In a team of 20 people, you can't afford 12 people not getting on. Yeah,
exactly. It's we had one hire like that, which was an intern that didn't work out, and it was apparent pretty quickly that was going to be a problem. And people like that can hide if you've got a multinational with thousands of employees, but not in a small startup.
Mm-hmm. So what can applicants do to yourself and other startups to make themselves stand out from the crowd?
I think personal recommendation is always the best route. But aside from that, I think taking the time to really know the company and something about them and make it a very personal application. And I realise that takes a lot more effort on the applicant's behalf. But I think there's no point in applying to 20 jobs, just chucking in a CV and getting 20 rejections and wondering why, when you could pick maybe 4 or 5 that you really, really want, and take a bit longer to personalise the application. I think the best example I've ever seen was we advertised for a sales and marketing internship position a while ago, and we had someone who branded their CV in our company style with our logo on it and various other things. And they also, as part of their application, their covering letter had an assessment of our current marketing approach and how we could do it better. And it was just a one-pager in both cases, and it probably didn't take the guy that long. But it made it, what would have been a fairly standard CV rise right to the top in our interview process. So I'd say try to personalise it, and you've got to take a bit of time over that. You can't just do it while you're sat on the beach at Salou or something like that. You've got to really do it properly.
That's true. And how important is social media in particular, such as tools as Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, for you in recruitment? Do you actively use them, or do you expect candidates to be interacting with you with them?
I think it's more the damage you can do on there than the benefits necessarily. It's both, but obviously we'd have a quick search around most applicants to see if there's anything out there that's interesting alongside all the information they provide in the process, and as most employers do. And I think no one's expecting you to be a robot, and we've all got pictures of ourselves in out in the pub or with friends or whatever, and that's all fine. But obviously you want to make sure there's nothing too ridiculous on there that might put off an employer. I think people can engage with us through social media, through Twitter and LinkedIn and things like that, and that is a bonus and shows that they're interested. But I wouldn't say it's sort of the be all and end all for us. I think it's just it's good practice to think when you're posting something online that it probably will be there, potentially forever. And so, if there's certain pictures on there you might want to, think about removing before you apply, then that could be a good thing. And also just thinking about that you're trying to look fairly professional when you apply. So if you probably don't want your email address to be, we had one from, I think, a Mr. Snakey at hotmail.com or something like that.
It's not particularly professional.
No, exactly. You've got to think these things through.
And do you actively then go out and check your clients, the candidates' digital shadows? I mean, if you've got someone's CV coming through, would you run it through your search engine to see if you can find anything about them?
Not as formally as that, actually. It's, we're a company that's advising other companies to be careful what they're exposing online. So, of course, we need to be careful what we expose ourselves. And, part of that is anything that our employees post about ourselves that we would be concerned about. But for applicants, it's more of a general sense check that there's, they're not a lunatic more than it is us going through and trying to dig up anything particularly interesting on them.
Yep. And what common mistakes would you see from people that they make in the application process?
We've had, so number one thing is not personalising it to the business in any way at all and just trying to chuck in a CV generically. And, that we pretty much filter that out straight away. And certainly, as I mentioned, if they get to the first call and they still don't really know what we do because they haven't bothered to look at the website, that's a massive red flag. At the same time, I mean, we've had some pretty bad ones through where, they've got the name of our company wrong. It's fairly basic. Even surprised. I mean, we've been called Defence Shadows, Digital Works, and Dark Shadows. 3 applications, and one of those was from someone at Oxford. He thought might have known better.
Although to be fair, they are quite good names. You should maybe think about changing from Digital Shadows to Dark Shadows.
That sounds like the evil version of us. So maybe another time.
So I mean they're pretty unforgivable if you can't get the name of the company right you're applying to, then you really need to have a good look at yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And what would you say was the hardest question that you ask in the interview process?
It depends on the applicant a bit. I mean, we don't have a stock really hard question, and it depends on the role. That said, the one that trips a lot of people up is we always ask them, usually in the first interview, what do we do at Digital Shadows? And leave it open and see how they describe it. And you'd be surprised, that filters out about half of people who don't seem to know what they're interviewing for or what we do. So strangely, a simple question like that can be the hardest in some respects.
Interesting. And can you give an insight into your office and work environment? And thinking of a startup, people have visions of beanbags, slides, spending 20% of your time on outside activities. Is it like the Social Network?
Not quite like that at our place. I think there's a sort of category of startups that are more the sort of .com kids with the skinny jeans who probably have a bit more of that going on, and we don't have any of the beanbags or any of that. But that said, we do. I mean, we work in Level 39 in Canary Wharf, which is a sort of special fintech startup space, and we've taken our own space now we've got about 30 desks up on the 42nd floor, and so with that comes quite a few great facilities we can use. So we actually do have, we've got a table football table. There's an Xbox around the corner. At 4:00 every day, they make cookies, which are pretty nice. And then there's there's a lot of weekly drinks events and things like that. So there's plenty of that going on. But in terms of bizarre office furniture and anything like that, we're not quite in the Google and Facebook category just yet, but open to suggestions if you've got any good ones.
One day we get there.